everyone. Welcome, chat. Welcome, Supercell community, to this talk on brand building. We're here with the Creator Academy. My name is Power Bang. I've been a content creator for the past near decade now, starting out with roots in Clash of Clans and then going to Brawl Stars and then eventually building a career in PUBG Mobile. And I've got some amazing friends here today, fellow content creators that are going to dive into this topic that I feel is incredibly important to building a successful career in content, in business, really in anywhere else. And so let's go ahead and bring our friends onto the screen now, and we'll go ahead and do some quick intros here. Go ahead, boys, wave to the camera, give them some excitement. We've got Clash with Ash here right below me. Clash with Ash has built over 1 million subscribers on YouTube between his Clash Royale and Raid Shadow Legends channels, and he's a stalwart, obviously, in Supercell's communities. So big welcome to him. Can't wait to pick his brain today on how he's built the channels that he has. We've got Alvaro845, the Spanish legend. He's amassed over 5 million subscribers and an amazing community, obviously playing all Supercell games, but most recently diving back into Clash of Clans. Super excited to pick your brain as well, my friend. And then also we've got Shane, formerly known as Clash with Shane, who has been a rock star in the Clash Royale community. He's approaching 600K on his YouTube channel. So again, a lot of great guests here today to dive in. So first and foremost, gentlemen, I'll go to you, Ash, first. Tell me a little bit about, I guess, your channel, your journey, and I guess how you've built the name that you have, today, and how people have come to recognize you. We got your voice coming through.
Hey Hey, Power Bang! Thank you so much.
I can hear you.
Number one thing
good.
to know about branding is that you should turn on your mic. That's the hot tip for the crowd out there. I'm so excited for this panel. Seriously, I've go back with these with all you guys for almost a decade now, and I'm sure we all have strong thoughts. Yeah. So for me, I'm going to state the obvious. Stream of conscious here for me is. How did I get started and how did I develop my branding? It was really through the game, through what I covered, right? It was through working with the developer and Supercell. I mean, I am Clash with Ash after all, right? It's in the name. And it was through just my love of a game, right? And branding myself around that game because that was my intentions, to have fun playing a video game. And that was basically it, you know. As time went by, I'm sure we can talk about that. Things shifted quite a bit in terms of the areas that I was interested in, the possibilities, the roads that I saw that I could traverse on YouTube, and my own personal brand, what I wanted to do. But in the beginning, it was just about a game and about frankly gaining the affinity and the attention of a developer so they could help promote me and help grow my channel while I was covering their game.
Amazing. So to I'm going to hit on these questions with Alvaro and Shane as well, but like, how long have you been creating content? And I guess, what were your thoughts when you started? Did you ever expect that this was going to be a career or something that was more than just like a hobby that you were doing on the side?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been over 10 years creating content, and since the very beginning, I wanted like my content and myself, I mean, to be attached to mobile gaming because I think. I truly think that is the future. It's I love it, and you can play anywhere with people from all the world. So I started 10 years ago covering first Clash of Clans, then moving to Clash Royale, Brawl Stars, now back to Clash of Clans, and yeah, I mean, ups and downs, and it's been like an amazing journey. Nothing much planned when I started, but yeah, I mean, it's been a really fun journey to keep improving myself.
Amazing. And then Shane, what about you, man? How long have you been creating content? And then did you get into this with like the idea of, hey, man, I'm going to be a YouTuber? Like, was that ever a thought, or did you just kind of luck into this?
Well, so I started YouTube with Clash Royale over 7 years ago, about a month after the Clash Royale like soft launched. And started out under the name Clash with Shane, which we'll kind of dive into the rebrand in a bit here. But when I first started, it was just kind of like, hey, I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to play Clash Royale, which is kind of why I got the Clash with Shane name. It was just very simple, very straightforward. And I just wanted to play this game and share it with people that also enjoyed it. And obviously it didn't take me until like 2 or 3 years before I could actually go full time onto YouTube. So I never really had that expectation that it would grow into something full time. Because obviously back then, like 7 years ago, like the whole content creation like scene wasn't as strong as it is today. Like, people didn't view it as like a career option, whereas nowadays, like, you ask anybody, like all the kids nowadays, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Everyone says like YouTuber or content creator or streamer or whatever. Whereas back then, 7 years ago, it wasn't really seen that way in the same light. Like, I remember telling people like in my personal circles, like, hey, I'm doing YouTube, and they'd be like, oh, like, what is that kind of thing? So yeah,
right.
Never, when I got into it, I never really thought that it was gonna be like this huge, like, life-changing career. But it turned out to be, so it's kind of it's been an amazing journey.
That's amazing. So I know when I first started out, same exact dilemma, right? When people would ask you, hey, so what do you do? And you're like, oh, I don't really know how to answer that question. And now you can literally just say, I'm a content creator, I'm a YouTuber, I'm a streamer. People get it. Like, it's more of an understood kind of occupation at this point in time. So before we get into like the nitty gritty of brand building, how you guys have built yours, I want to talk about like what brand building is and what it's comprised of. Like, what is a brand? And I think the common, I guess, understanding of a brand is that many people think it's like a logo. You know, it's a graphic design, YouTube header or Twitter banner, whatever it is. And it's honestly so much more than that. Really, there's probably 4 main things that I would say a brand is comprised of. And one is the identity. Like, who are you as kind of a brand or a business? And when you start putting yourself out there as an individual, it's like, what is this whole identity meant to communicate? The next part is the image, right? Like, how does it look? How does it feel when you put something out there publicly? The graphics portion of it, the logo, the you know, and it doesn't have to be polished. We'll dive into that here shortly. I know Tim's always like, but this guy, he's just got like stick figures or whatever for his brand, and that can work as well. And it's about the purpose and intention behind it. So you got your identity, you've got your image, you also have the culture and what type of like community you're trying to build around yourself and around the community that you're building. What is that culture like, and what do you guys kind of do as a people? And lastly is like the personality. And this is something that I know a few of you guys can really speak to as far as like what you're trying to build. But it's all about doing a few key objectives in when you build a brand. First is creating an awareness of what it is that you're doing, right? Having more exposure, getting more people to recognize like, hey, you exist first and foremost. And then once that happened, it's building loyalty and getting people to really buy into your community, to what you're about, and that culture that you're trying to build. And then lastly is the trust aspect of it, right? Is like getting people to trust you. So when you say, hey, you know, come show up for me, they will. If something bad happens, heaven forbid, they have your back. If you want to, you know, pitch a product, like, hey, I really believe in this game, you got people that are down to go try it. There's that trust that's been developed. And so those are the few things that I feel are really important about building a brand, is that you have that awareness, you have the loyalty, you have the trust. And it goes beyond, I guess, just building an image. And so one of the things, I guess, Shane, I want to start with you first. I guess when you first started a channel, did you give any thought to kind of, I guess, how you were presenting yourself to the world? And if so, what were those?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think everyone when they first get started in content creation, like I think most people are super self-conscious. At least I was back then, like 7 years ago. It was like you're so nervous recording videos, creating content, like you want to present yourself as like this perfect person. In a sense, like if I would stutter in a video, I would like cut that out. But then as time went on, like you realize that like being yourself and being authentic is the most powerful brand you can do. And so that kind of shifted. But yeah, when I first started, it was one of those things where I didn't put a whole lot of effort into like the name of the channel or like the presentation in terms of like the icon. I think I remember I used like a P.E.K.K.A. from Clash Royale like as my like channel icon.
Classic.
Yeah, and then I think like everyone back in the day was doing something similar, but yeah, like you didn't give too much thought to it. Besides the whole fact of like me and myself being like overly like critical of the way I performed in a video, whereas now it's just way more relaxed and just way more like authentic, I suppose. I
love that. Tim, what about you, man?
Yeah, similar to Shane, I come from a long line of the Clash With family. the Clash with Erics, the Clash with Shanes, the Clash with... there's a lot of Clash Withers out there. And I think that a lot of that is to what Shane's point was, is just starting with the basics, man. Like, I know I like this game, it rhymes, or it fits, whatever, and you kind of go with it. I did not put any intentionality into what I wanted to do, or I was just concerned with trying to figure out how to upload a video onto YouTube, I think, frankly.
Amazing.
And honestly, I think that's what people should be focused on the early, you know, a lot of people, there's so much information now, unlike when we got started, all of us here, that you can almost get paralysis by analysis, I feel like, as an up-and-coming creator. Sometimes you just put stuff out there, and for me, branding, you know, it can seem kind of contrived at, you know, to a certain extent, the ways that some people talk about it, you know, and so, like this, to your point, Power Bang, earlier, like you're saying that I always point out like channels that have no quote unquote branding that are massive, you know, at our talent agency, our biggest talent doesn't really have much in terms of branding. They don't have a face, they don't have like, you know, like, but they're still incredibly successful. So to me, branding really became, you know, I didn't think about it at all in the beginning. I just tried to put stuff out there and see what stuck, see what people enjoyed, you know? And then after that, after I kind of got my niche a little bit and got my footing a little bit, then it just became, okay, what is resonating with my audience? What are my strengths as a creator? And how can I lean into those more? And how can I give people more of that? And that was really it, as simple as that.
That's amazing. Before I come to you, Oliver, I want to say hi to the chat, obviously. Thank you guys for obviously contributing questions. If you have any that you want to ask either the group or an individual at any point during today's presentation, just throw them out there in the chat, and I'll do my best to surface those, and we'll get some answers to your questions. Obviously, try to keep them related to brand building, but again, hit the chat. We are watching it, and appreciate you, so thanks for being here. To your point, Tim, about people that are not putting a ton of effort, right, into the image portion of their brand identity. It's still part of their identity. It's part of the culture that they're creating. And I use things like, for example, Dream. His identity was the fact that he didn't show his identity, right, as a creator. And that can be incredibly powerful in and of itself. So it doesn't necessarily always mean, in my eyes, that you have to be incredibly polished or incredibly fancy with your artwork. It's really just about being intentional. So it's like, if that's the style and you want to be incredibly lazy with it, and I say lazy in like, it's not high effort to do like some stick figure art and, you know, subscribe or, you know, I'll eat your cookies type of, you know, Twitter banners that we've seen like Mr. Beast and other popular creators use. It's just, it's purposeful, right? And that's part of the culture and the, I don't care. It works. It can work. And so I don't want people to leave with the idea of like, oh man, I got to stress out about being super polished and getting a great logo and you know, a great set of banners. That's not necessary, but it can be something that if that's what you're trying to build, totally fine. Alvaro, coming to you, when you started, and I'm building on something here as far as like kind of getting the origin stories. Did you have any intention with what you were doing when you started? Or were you just trying to make some videos?
No, I mean, I just wanted to make the videos. I mean, my first videos, they didn't have any intros, no banners to cover like the black parts that you have when recording from a tablet. No thumbnail. So it took me a long to just realize, okay, that's important too, because for me, I mean, I think that the core of a brand is the identity. I mean, like the brand identity, it's all, and the identity is not just a logo. I mean, you mentioned before, it's just the way you communicate, the content you put out there, your edition, your style. So it's something that goes beyond, and it's that when someone sees your content, they can recognize that it's from you and coming from you, and without seeing any logo, without seeing that the title or what channel is that posted. So I think that's the whole idea. So yeah, at the beginning I just wanted to put the content out there, and I think that the best advice is just to be yourself, because it's the easiest way to get people identified or attached to something, to you, because creating a character, imaginary character who is not you, it's super difficult to keep on that role all the time in all the videos and all the content.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. I think characters can work, but again, it has to be very intentional and you have to stay in it. The creator that immediately comes to mind is like a Dr. Disrespect, who has been very much a character for his entire career. And when you see somebody like that out of character, it's almost awkward, right? But they really embrace it. They live in it. And, you know, that's just something that it can be done, but it's difficult. That's a commitment in and of itself. So we've talked to all of these guys about like their origin, what they were thinking about when they started. And I want to add my, you know, little 2 cents here. Very similar, right? It was my origin of YouTube was really efficiency and cutting down on conversations that I was having over and over and over again in Clash of Clans. So Clash of Clans was my first like ever YouTube video, at least one that I put out on the Powerbank channel. And it was questions like, how do I funnel troops? How do I 3-star? How do I, you know, you get the idea, like technical questions about the game. And I was like, I'm tired of saying this over and over and over again until I'm blue in the face. I'm just going to record it and put it out there and then refer to it. And so that's kind of how it started for me. There was no like, hey, this is a business. There's, you know, this is something that I need to build like some sort of mystique or brand identity around from the start. But eventually things pick up traction, right? You start to get some viewership. The videos that you are putting out start to become, I guess, successful. So I guess my next question is, at what point did you guys decide like, hey, maybe I should do a logo. Maybe I should, you know, start to think about like who I am to the world. I'll go back to you, Shane. When was that for you? And, you know, what was the first things you kind of thought of as far as like, I guess, becoming legitimate as a business, so to speak?
Well, I would say probably around the time that like, I was going more full time into it and was able to dedicate a lot more time into like the content creation journey. But I think in terms of like creating like a brand identity and like a logo and all those like official things to make you into like a brand, I don't know. I guess I just like when you create just like these easy to make logos initially because you weren't really considering it. Eventually, you get to the point where you look back at it and you go like, man, that needs to change. It's literally just a pack with some text on it that says Clash with Shane. I need to change that because I don't like looking at it myself. And so that's kind of what sparked like my initial like creating a brand, creating like an S logo or whatever, and kind kind of redoing my overlays and stuff like that. So I would say probably around the time that I went full time with content creation, I was able to commit more time to it. It's probably around when I was like officially going in for the branding.
Makes sense. Alvaro, what about you?
Okay, it's a good story because I just was hit on the email by a random guy who just said, hey, I'm studying graphic design, animation, and so on. I want to make an intro for you, and that intro became a logo and blah blah blah. But the good story is that that person is the lead of Patographics, which is our video editing company inside TQ. I mean, they produce all the content. So that's been the guy who has been together with me and my channel and my brand for since the beginning. So that was the first moment I realized, hey, I should maybe have a Polish image out there with logo, intros, outros, and thumbnails for sure.
I love that. I see a question from Rick in the chat, and Ash, I'm going to come to you really quickly. Similar question. At what point, if any point, let's put it this way. I know you're not one that cares a ton about, brand and personal rep, but I did see you change to kind of like that 3D environment and the CWA. What prompted that change, and why did you end up going that direction when you did?
Yeah, that was a mistake. It was a mistake. First of all, the guy who did it is amazing. But I was peer pressured into building a brand I was peer pressure because I felt like everybody's channels were nice and fancy and cool and had, moving imagery and animations and stuff flying at you everywhere. And it was great. It was fine. But I feel like looking back in hindsight, I feel like if I could do things over, I would do it just a little bit more simplistic, I actually look back into those creators in the early days who straight up had gameplay, webcam, and that's it. And I felt like it was easier to connect with your audience without all that moving and loud stuff. But I felt like because I was so nitty-gritty or crappy in terms of my branding, my visuals, my aesthetics, that I felt like branding was that. Better visuals, better animations, better whatever. And I think that was a bad choice. It's not like detrimental, and I think everybody should be encouraged to try different things and see what works for them. But in hindsight, I didn't need all that. I think that my brand ended up being nothing to do with art or graphics or logos or anything. It ended up having to do with just being a little bit more personable,
100%, and I couldn't agree with that more. I think in my my study of the internet and creators, and also through my own experience, I think really you guys hit on it earlier. The authenticity is really one of the key things, and that can mean different things for different people as far as what ultimately is being channeled out to the world. But whatever is true to you, your story, your experience, that's really what is the most important thing. And I think that every creator and every individual out there on the planet, you have a tribe of people that you can connect with. And if you're not being authentic, and if you're delivering kind of a filtered view or a character, you may not connect with the people that you should be connecting with, or the people that should be connecting with you, in order to build that loyalty and in order to build that trust as a community. So before going into, I want to address Rick's question as well, which essentially is, should a new creator think about branding now, or should you just start making content and learn what and who you are first? I think that's a fantastic question. The way I would answer that is lean towards the latter, right? Figuring out who you are, what you want to do, your identity, because that's the first component of building a successful brand is determining what are your core values? What is your mission as a creator? And what are you trying to do for yourself, but also for the community and the people that you serve and that you're making videos and content for? Once you have that understanding, it's a bit easier to determine what type of image to put out there and how you should be illustrating those core values and your message to the world. And what I see with so many channels out there, there is an element of simplicity to it. You don't have to go crazy. And I know when I work with graphic designers or a team, they give me a bunch of fancy graphics that are animated and flashy. Oftentimes the message to them is hey, tone it down a little bit. I don't need as many things to move because they're almost distracting and they take attention away from the content or from me as a person that's speaking or whatever. And so I do believe that simplicity is good. But I think that with anything, graphics, imagery, all of that should be purposeful. And what I mean by that is if you're trying to implement some sort of design or style or messaging, you should just be doing it intentionally and think about everything that you're putting out there. And if it ultimately serves your end objective or your mission as a creator. And so I would love to get thoughts, from Shane, Alvaro, Tim on I guess that question in particular, like Rick's question, I'll repeat it just for, keeping it fresh. Should a new creator think about branding now, or should you just start making content and learn who and what you are first? So Shane, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, I was just going to basically agree with what you said. Just really focus on making good content first, because you don't know like what your brand is going to be and what brand to build until you know like what kind of brand that you want to be as a person. And so you can spend all this time thinking about like what your logo is, what your overlay, and getting too involved in the wrong things, when really should just be focusing on like making really good content and then building a brand around the content that you can make. So I definitely agree with what you said. And I want to go back to something that Ash said, where back in our days when we started like creating content, we all kind of just jumped into it and created content. And then as time went on, everyone else started creating these fancy like logos, these fancy banners, these fancy overlays. And then you felt like, oh, I need to do that to keep up. Like that's the competition. You need to kind of stay ahead of the game, I guess. But then you start focusing on the wrong things. You start focusing on like overlays and headers and logos, when really you should just be focusing on making good videos. And now we're seeing a shift away from that, where it's just like, hey, make content first. Your content is king. The branding and everything else comes afterwards. So definitely agree with what you said in terms of like creating content now, figuring out what you want to do, and then build your brand around that.
I love that. And, I feel almost hypocritical in some senses when I talk about brand and whatnot. And I want to clarify that. Like, I've always had kind of an emphasis on graphics or overlays and whatnot. And I think the big reason for that in my personal scenario was I've got 20 years of experience as a graphic designer. So it was like always important for me to have like a level of polish or a level of like professionalism, at least the way I kind of interpreted that. And that was part of my identity, was that like when you go to one of my streams, for example, that it's like, oh dang, this is like watching ESPN or something, of high production value. That was part of the way that I felt I could differentiate myself from other creators, is because I had that skill set. But I think for the average person who doesn't have decades of experience as a graphic designer, I wouldn't put as much emphasis into that. And really, it's all about the content. It's all about making people enjoy the time that they spend with you. And that's really what it is. It's an exchange of time for value, hopefully, in return. And that could be in the form of entertainment. It could be in the form of education, or even just camaraderie to a certain extent. And that's the part where it's really important to figure out what type of creator you are, so that you can continue to build brand identity and imagery around those characteristics. So Alvaro, I'll go to you, kind of repeating the same question as far as, your thoughts on new creators, building branding now or waiting. What would your advice be?
I couldn't agree more. Right now it's good to have a good branding and a polished logo and all that fancy stuff. It's great, but content it's more important, way more important. So I think that's if trying to design the best logo, the best intro, your best fan kit or graphic kit is a stopper in any way to put time and effort in the content, then you should just drop it, because content is king, particularly at the beginning, because you have to connect with your audience and to make them feel comfortable when they are watching your content and watching you. So it's more important to just have a good audio, a good content, right to the topic. That's much better than having a great logo. How many channels do you guys have subscribed just because the logo was cool? It's not that important.
I think the answer to that might be zero. It's literally all about the content. Do I enjoy the content? Tim, I got another question coming up. It's going to be a different one here in just a moment, but I wanted to tag on to one of the things Alvaro said, which is like the intro. I'm sure all of us have had like that, cool intro that we've had developed and overpaid for, and not overpaid in the form of like, it's probably worth the money, but was it worth like putting that in? The interesting thing for me is like I got that cool hype intro or whatever, and people resonated with it for me, but it also, when you look at retention and building like new audience and kind of finding new people, when you look at a 20-second long like power bang hype reel to come into a video, does that really accomplish the goal? And you know, I think we've seen a move towards a lot more simplistic, like let's just get straight into the meat and potatoes of what this video is and what it's here. I think that makes a lot of sense, but I'm sure all of us have made that that decision, right, to pull in these intros. I mean, raise your hands really quickly and we can move on. Like, did you guys do that with the video intros? Have you ever had an intro? I think you have, Alvaro. I know Tim has. I have. So that's something that, while it seems cool, I think being cool shouldn't necessarily be the goal, right? As creators, I think a lot of us can fall into the trap of, man, we just want to look cool. We want people to think we're cool. And it's not really, again, serving the end mission of, you know, great content and, you know, retention, but also like building that identity of who you are. There might be ways to brand yourself from an image perspective, but do it much quicker. So that's just a lesson learned from the past. All right, moving on to like one of the next questions from the chat. This one's from Abdod. How much difference does a face cam make? And does not using one act like a handicap to the creator? I think this is a really interesting and polarizing topic, and I think many of us may have differing views. I want to start with Tim at Clash with Ash. Feel free to hop in on this one. What are your thoughts on face cams?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to circle back and rudely interject on that last question really quickly, too.
Yeah, hit it.
Is that, like, I think that there is no, to answer kind of like Rick's question in the chat too, like I don't think there is a right answer or a wrong answer to starting out and creating a brand. Do you have to think about branding? Do you not have to think about branding? I think you can pave the road to success either way. I think that it being intentional and having forethought and a lot of effort and intentionality gone into your branding and what you want to say, who you want to appeal to, blah, 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 blah. I think that could be great and it could be important, and it's great for creators who have the creative energy to think about that. But some people just need to put the content out there and then let them grow into their own shoes, their own comfortableness, and figure out what they want to do. You know, it's hard to figure out everything out the gate. So I would err on the side of saying don't sweat it, but be thinking about it, you know. In terms of the face cam, well, to be totally real with you, I don't think that Facecam has a big impact on success on YouTube. We see some of the most successful. You mentioned, you know, Dream earlier, you know, and you can mention there's a lot of creators, right? But it also depends on what your goal is, right? Who your audience is. I mean, it's a crappy answer, but I think a lot of these answers are it depends, right? Even in your individual channel, in the type of content that you're making. I just got off a long call this morning with Judo Sloth, who's the biggest Supercell creator right now, English speaking at least, and you know, I asked him, you know, like, how long does it take to make a video, you know? And he's like, well, some of them, like, 80 hours, and they're 3 minutes long. And some of them, like, 8 hours, and they're 30 minutes long. But some of those, the reason I mention this is because it's about the intention of the video. Some of those 3-minute guides are just a guide on how to do something. So think about like what you're trying to accomplish with your video or with your channel in a more broad sense. And then think about who your audience is. A lot of things on YouTube, most of the content that I consume personally outside of gaming, there's no face cams, you know? Or there's a host in just in the intro and that's it, you know? And I think that helps. But I don't think, long story short, is I don't think there's a correlation between YouTube success, generally speaking, and having to have a face cam. If you make great content, OJ didn't have a face cam in the early days, and he was one of the fastest growing Supercell creators of all time, you know? I feel like it's about what you're trying to accomplish with the content. If you're trying to accomplish relatability and relationship building, that's very challenging without a face cam. But it depends on what type of content you want to make, what type of content you want to be known for. I will say, though, from an advertising and a marketing standpoint, it does impact severely the amount of opportunities you're going to get, the amount of brands that want to work for you. As a new creator, you might not be thinking about that. It might be the last thing from your mind. You just want to build that foundation. But as somebody who works with a lot of advertisers in this space, people with the webcam who can deliver a script in an authentic way to their audience while captivating their attention, talking about a game, that is, you know, that's the creme de la creme. That's what they really, really want. That's what they're looking for. So not to say that you can't be successful and have opportunities without that. You certainly can, and many, many do. It's just a little bit more, you know, challenging, I would say. You won't get the amount of opportunities.
That's a great point, Tim. Before we go to Shane and Alvaro, on that last point you made with brands, think of it like this, right? Where a brand that's reaching out to you to work with them, they're trying to leverage your audience and what you've built and the trust and loyalty that you have in your audience, and they're trying to, get a little piece of that, basically. And if they're doing a production or something like that, or an event where you're a guest and you don't have a way to display yourself, it's really easy to pass you over. So I think there's an element, to having a face cam that makes you more valuable to work with. But I'll come back to my thoughts here first. I'm gonna let the other guys go first. Shane, I'll come to you for your thoughts on face cams.
Yeah, I just agree with Ash. Obviously, I think in the early days, everyone was like, hey, we all need a face cam. This is what the meta is. This is the trend. Like, we need to, keep up with the game. But then as the meta has shifted, we're realizing, like, hey, you don't need a face cam anymore. It's what your content is. There's so many successful creators. Like, even in Clash Royale, you look at the scene now, and it's so drastically different than it was, 3 years ago, where you got some of the most popular channels in Clash Royale don't even have a face cam anymore. It's literally just gameplay and their voice. And I think what ended up happening was just like audiences' expectations changed. Like, they got tired of all the over editing, all the fancy overlays, and all the over the top everything. And then now they just want like the laid back experience. They just want to relax and enjoy some videos. And so I definitely don't think you need to have a face cam earlier on. And I want to go back to something that Ash mentioned earlier, was like the paralysis by analysis quote, in that like you can get caught up just overthinking everything, like branding. Do you need to have a fancy logo and fancy overlay? Do you need face cam? And all these different things. It's like just make the content that you want to make, find what you enjoy first, and then see where it goes from there. Like, do you want to have a face cam? Do you want to have that like face-to-face connection with your audience? Then go for it. If you don't want to have a face cam, then don't like push yourself to have a face cam if you don't want to. So I would just say, like, create the content you want to create, and then kind of go from there.
Amazing. Alvaro, what about you? Face cams?
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of the old school, so I think, or I tend to feel that face cam is necessary, but it's not. I mean, you can work and have a successful channel without face cam. It's true that you may lose some good opportunities from the marketing standpoint, but yeah, there are plenty of examples of creators that right now, I mean, they have channels exploding without showing their face. I would like to point out a good reflection about this, that it's really difficult to think about this in particular when you are starting. But if everything goes good or super good, then it may be a thing that I've met some creators that who doesn't show the face at their videos, and they can walk freely on a gaming event because nobody knows who they are. So they are missing a cool part, which is like knowing in person your fans, subscribers, and so on, taking pictures. But on the other side, I mean, you are not a celebrity, because it has advantages and disadvantages. So that's a thing that I think nobody or few people thinks at the very beginning when starting a YouTube career. But it's a thing to consider as well, because when you have like, I mean, I'm talking like a massive succeed, and it's a really little problem, but it's a thing to take in mind and into consideration as well.
That's a great point. And I think it comes back to what are your goals, right, as a creator? And that's, again, a personal journey that you have to kind of come to realization with. And that's why it's really important to understand what your core values are, what your mission is, and what you're trying to accomplish with creating videos, right? Is it more of just an art passion project where it's like, I'm putting something out for the world, the people, if they enjoy it, that makes me happy? Or are you trying to grow a business, right? And I think the metrics become a bit more important in that scenario. So to chime in a bit on my thoughts on face cams, I'm a bit split right on this. I certainly think that it is very possible to grow a successful channel with no face cam. It's not required. You can certainly create videos that are engaging, enjoyable, and ultimately leveraging the brand IP of the game that you're playing in order to create like a really engaging piece of content. The reality, though, is that you're leaning very heavily on the game itself, and you're not injecting as much personality into it from your own. And so things like switching games or doing something different later on down the road might become a bit more difficult if you have not introduced any part of yourself. The reason I say that is if you have no cam, heck, even no voice, I've seen that with some creators, it would be difficult to take the content that people are there for and switch that out. Say if you either burn out on the game or it stops performing well or whatever the scenario might be, it would be a bit easier if you had that additional personal connection and people knew who you are, to pivot a bit later on. But I think, you know, as far as the creation of content that performs well, certainly not required. But that's one of those things that you just have to figure out, like, what is the goal? Is it just like to perform as well as possible with this particular game? If so, rock and roll. But ultimately, don't let the fact that maybe you don't have a camera stop you. That might be something that you could actually use to build intrigue, as many creators have. I know a bunch of creators in my ecosystem that have still yet to do a face reveal and are even over 10 million subscribers. So again, they haven't pivoted and gone to other games or titles just yet. But they've built a massive following, and so it's certainly very possible to do so. So that's kind of like my thoughts on face cams. I would love to jump to another question from the audience. This one from Joanne. This is a point that I wanted to touch on as well, and I was going to ask you, Shane, since you've kind of recently gone through this rebrand. I'm gonna throw this one your way, which is if you want to change aspects of your brand, will it hurt your brand? And I want to elaborate on that a little bit more from my end, which is like, what are the, I guess, risks of changing elements of your brand or rebranding in and of itself, and what are the things that should be accounted for when you're planning on making that shift? And so I'll throw it to you, Shane.
Yeah, I think the first and foremost, the question is like, so you say change aspects. It's like, what are you changing? Because certain things can be changed without hurting your brand. Other things can really hurt your brand. For example, if you are like a family-friendly creator and you all of a sudden shift to non-family friendly, it's probably going to hurt your brand a lot, and you have to rebuild that image, that trust with like a new audience. But for me personally, I went through this. Like, I changed my branding near the end of last year in December, where previously it was Clash with Shane with my channel name. I had used that for 7 years, and then I decided to change it to In Shane, change the logo, the channel name. I still have the old like header just for people that come to my channel that might recognize the old name. But I guess what kind of drove me to changing that aspect was wanting to change my content. I wanted to target a whole new audience. I wanted to change the content I was recording because I wanted to try new things and grow as a creator. And it just kind of timed out correctly with like, hey, I've done this thing for the past 7 years. It's time for a change for me personally. And so I paired that up with like, hey, I'm changing my content. I'm targeting a whole new audience. Now is the time to also change my branding, new name, new logo, and that way, hopefully, just makes the things a bit more appealing to like a new audience, and also just something more personable. As I started creating Clash with Shane content, and as the years went on, I started to kind of like dislike the name of my channel just because it wasn't very personable. It was attached to one game, and I always just felt like it was hard to build like a personal brand on that particular title. And so I wanted to change it for a while, and then it kind of just timed out nicely with wanting to change the content I was creating, going from strategic videos to more of a like entertaining style content, less uploads versus from daily videos to once per week kind of thing. And so it timed out nicely, and obviously it hurt the brand initially. I knew going into it that like doing a drastic shift, not only in the branding of like the title of the channel, the logo, but also the content that I was producing, it was going to cause a shift. Because whenever you change content, like when you're targeting a whole new audience, it takes time. And so I knew kind of like going through that rebranding process that there's going to be a period of time where I had to kind of churn through my old audience to find the new audience. So definitely I would say that like it didn't hurt the brand in a sense of like long-term performance, like building it towards something new, but short-term definitely hurt the brand in terms of like audience, like targeting a whole new audience, trying to find that audience, and also like your old audience kind of tunes out. They don't really like tune into your new content. So I'd say like definitely does. Certain aspects can hurt the brand if not handled properly, and that's one of the things that I made a few mistakes in my rebranding process in terms of like not communicating properly with my audience and not keeping them in the loop. If you don't handle it properly, it can hurt your brand image, and also going down to like what aspects are you changing? Is it just your title, your logo, your branding? If so, it won't hurt the brand as much, right? As long as you communicate it. If you're changing from like completely different video formats, whole new audience, it might hurt it a bit more. If you're going from family friendly to non-family friendly, definitely going to hurt it a bit more as well.
I'd love to ask a follow-up there, Shane. You mentioned several times about like switching your like target audience. Do you feel comfortable sharing like, you know, what was kind of like the previous audience demographic versus what you wanted to shift towards, and like what caused you to kind of want to do that?
Well, I would say like the previous audience was way more of a like, I guess, competitive player in Clash Royale. People that wanted to know like the best deck strategy in the game. When I would look back at my metrics back, you know, when I was creating deck videos, it was for the most part a very like large and loyal audience that was tuning in every single day. But the videos weren't really getting pushed out to a wider like the casual base, right? And so I wanted to go from targeting like a hardcore, dedicated, strategic audience to more of a casual player, and it almost instantly like it's a way different audience with different expectations. So obviously the videos didn't perform as well initially, but now when I look at my videos and look at the metrics, you can just see that it's attracting so many more like new viewers, whereas previously it was just all the same viewers, like returning viewers all the time. And in terms of like what caused that shift was just me as a creator wanting to like try new things and test new things. You know, when you play different decks every day for like 7 years, at some point you're like, hey, you know, I've done every single deck in the game. All it is nowadays is just like it's the same exact decks, just with like one card changed. There's nothing really new. So I felt burnt out from a creative perspective in terms of like covering that content. So I wanted to try something new that would push my boundaries and grow as a creator. And so that's kind of what initiated that.
I love that. No, that's great. And I appreciate you diving kind of into the depths of why. I reached a similar point myself when I had, you know, Archer Queen walked my queen enough directions and ways with enough support troops where I felt like I had done everything, and that was a big catalyst for wanting to kind of switch things up on my channel as well. Alvaro, I want to come to you because I've seen in your career you've had some really cool partnerships. You've had some even, you know, products that have been launched with your face on them. I want to talk to you a little bit about that experience and kind of how that came to be and how your brand kind of played into some of those experiences. So if you could share a little bit about, you know, like your rice bowl and anything else that, you know, is pertinent there that you know, your brand kind of tied into.
Yeah, I try always to attach my brand to mobile gaming and to move through all Supercell games, so not get attached to just one of those. So that's why I started with Clash of Clans and then moved to Clash Royale, and then Brawl Stars, and now back Clash of Clans. But the whole idea is to be like the person, the reference person in that spectrum, or that niche, if you want to call that way. So in my case, because I do content in Spanish, it's been good to have like a one market cover. So when any brand wanted to attach or to target my audience, mobile gamers, I mean the demographics that I had, it was good because you were very clearly attached to that audience. So yeah, I've done like from participating in live events, tournaments in the street, like they built like a stage in the downtown of Madrid, and I was playing with subscribers, which was super cool. To just having my logo and on products on the supermarket. It was rice, just that you just buy it, and it was my logo. That logo that I didn't pay any attention when I created it, because I never felt that it was like super important. That logo was printed in 100,000 or even more. I don't remember. Maybe a million packages of rice all around the supermarkets in Spain. So if you build a good brand and it's well connected in a way with an audience, it will bring you a lot of opportunities, and also getting new audience as well, because you start, people start talking about you, because it's easier to just refer a brand than refer to the whole content. The brand is like the summary, to just highlight that, hey, this guy is good. It's better to say the name than saying that this content is good. So yeah, I have like a bunch of examples, but definitely if you build a good brand identity with some values in your content, interaction with your audience and that kind of stuff, you can definitely take advantage of that to grow your channel, to grow your brand even more, and to get good opportunities.
Amazing. I can't wait to dive into that a bit deeper. I'm going to keep going on some of the audience questions because you guys got some really good ones today. So, Tim, this one's coming to you. This one's from Red Eyes Official. He says, would you guys say there's any distinct differences between building a brand for mobile gaming and streaming, keyword being mobile, versus the more popular platforms? And I would argue on more popular, maybe. Just depend. Like, I think in content, that's probably fair to say. But Tim, throw you that one.
Yeah, man. I mean, well, mobile's the biggest gaming platform in the world, so I will argue on it. But beyond that, I will say that to the point of the question, the only thing, frankly, the only thing that I would say is different from mobile to non-mobile is most of your viewers are likely going to be mobile, whereas on a PC game, I would say most of your viewers, or at least it's going to be closer to 50-50 watching you non-mobile. So that should inform the size of your face cam, the size of your thumbnails, the size of, that should inform everything, just noting, and that goes back to what I said earlier about like a small face cam and a big extravagant background on your overlay. It's not going to work on mobile when most of your viewers are mobile. They can barely see you over there. So if you're covering mobile games and you want to build a brand, you want that relatability, then you ought to make things bigger than you think might be necessary. Other than that, though, I don't really see any. I guess the only other thing to touch on maybe is that because mobile is such a global platform in terms of mobile games in general, I would say that you should at least acknowledge and be aware of where people are watching, who is watching your videos. It's always important to know who is watching your content, who is watching your videos, what is your average viewer, who is your average viewer, who are you talking to, I think it's important to consider those things. And in global, I think more often than PC. But in PC, if you make a video and you're speaking English, I feel like your general audience is going to be a little bit concentrated towards where you are, whereas in mobile, I think that for example, for a US content creator, a high US demographic would still be below 50% in mobile. If you're looking at a Minecrafter, it would be way above 50%, So I think understanding the demographics, and that might inform some of the brand decisions that you want to make. But ultimately, aside from those factors, I think that, there's no major difference.
I appreciate that, and I want to dive into yet another audience question here right now, which is one I think we probably all have our input on,
Swearing?
which is really family friendly.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how important is being family friendly, right? Panda was commenting in chat about it, and does family friendly help more with your branding and with advertisers? That's something that I feel like we should probably dive into. Shane, I see your hand wiggling over there. Tell me what you think.
I just wanted to cover this because I mentioned the family friendly thing when I was talking about changing the aspects of your brand and how it can impact you. And the question of, does being family friendly help more with branding and advertisers? First of all, it can be your brand. Like, being not family friendly can be very successful for many creators because there's an audience for that kind of content. So that can be your brand. What I was referring to more so is that if you have built up a brand of being family friendly and then shift to not family friendly, that can cause a disruption. In terms of like advertisers, it's going to be hit or miss. There's going to be some advertisers that want to work with family friendly creators only. There's also going to be other advertisers that want to work with people that aren't family friendly. So it's hit or miss with that. I'd say one example of, like, in terms of changing your brand from like non-family friendly or from family friendly to non-family friendly, that worked out. It's a good friend of mine, KFC, who created a whole new channel called Ken, and initially was family friendly content and then shift to non-family friendly, but it was more like authentic to himself and his personality. And because of that, it really resonated with a whole new audience, and his channel is like popping off right now. So you don't have to be restricted to certain boundaries of like family friendly or non-family friendly, even if you have in the past. It's just doing what's authentic to yourself. So for me, like, my content is family friendly because I'm generally like, that's just how I am in real life, right? So it just, it goes to your personality and what you want to do.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's certainly similar to Facecam, no Facecam. I think there's audiences for both, right? Like, whether or not you want to be super edgy and, even way over the line for what advertisers are willing to work with. There's people that will watch that. But again, there are consequences, right, to going down these different roads. I think people can challenge your authenticity as a creator if you're like super straight-laced and, kind of going out of your way to not present yourself as you normally would to the world. And on the flip side of things, especially like given my visibility, as an agency operating in this space, working with creators and seeing some of the tools that are out there to scan content at scale. If you say curse words on public platforms, that is in a database somewhere. Like, people can see that. And so when they do background on a creator and they're doing a check to make sure that this person is brand safe, keep in mind that everything that you say out there is likely logged in some fashion or another. And depending on the software platform that's being used, you can see some of this stuff. And so that's something that you should keep in mind when you're speaking on, platforms like Twitter/X, like whatever that is these days, Instagram, YouTube, etc. That is kind of logged to an extent. I don't say that to scare you, but I think it's often overlooked as far as like what is logged and what is accessible to advertisers and people that are working. It's quite scary how much data is that's out there on all of us. And so my advice for those that are trying to work with brands is understand, I guess, how important is that to you, to your business model, and to you as far as your own authenticity. And first and foremost, be who you are. But recognize that if you really feel it's valuable to drop an F-bomb in your content, like, know that there are people that will say that's not acceptable for us to be able to partner with you. And if you're cool with like not proceeding with like a relationship or something like that, cool, like, move forward. And I know it's helpful to look at like terms of service and fan policies for all of the. I believe Supercell has one that I believe actually could be modified soon. I'm not fully qualified to speak on that, but keep in the loop on whatever the terms and conditions actually are and what the current status is, to keep in mind like what's acceptable for the different fan programs and the creator programs that are out there. So that's something from my end. Again, be authentic, but know that actions have consequences regardless of what they are. And it's very sensitive of a topic for a lot of brands and advertisers in the space. So there is a consequence for being non-family friendly. Tim, do you have anything that you want to chime in there, or Alvaro?
No, I think that we're on Supercell's channel, so I want to be careful too about. And I don't know exactly what their policy is right now, but I think it's safe to say that they've been much more lenient about working with creators who are, developing their brand for all audiences, let's say, and not just super kid friendly, because in a lot of ways their games are for all audiences as well, right? So it's not just kids who play these games. So I think that it's commendable how they've kind of become more flexible. Obviously, Shane mentioned Ken. I think he's like a standout in terms of what he's been able to do on the comedy side and the character kind of, not that his character, well, I guess some of his content is character kind of skit based, but there's an audience for that, man, and there's an audience for everything. And I think the only thing that I struggle with is I drop some F-bombs here or there very occasionally, but whenever I do, I try to make sure it's almost for a reason. I almost want to like really emphasize something, and very occasionally, because I do know that I've established my brand with families that watch me, and it's something that you just got to be careful of. And I know that every time I curse or whatever the heck, I know that I might be alienating a dad and his kid or whatever, whoever watching my content. So there's definitely something to be considerate of, but ultimately you just got to be authentic, and I would love to get your guys' question, not to take over the host role, and I know we're kind of up against it a little bit here.
Go for it.
Lance, but I would love to get your take on this. If I was a new creator right now, the thing I would struggle with the most, I think, when it talks about branding and what I want to do with my channel is, it feels like everything nowadays, especially in the TikTok era, I'm old, guys. I'm an old man. And man, I'm a long format kind of guy. I buck the trend on everything, and it probably speaks to my lack of success recently, to be honest with you. But the thing about it is I feel like everything. Listen, controversy and negativity gets views like crazy, So if you're a new creator right now, or having a shtick and a character, which probably that's what I would probably do if I was starting right now, right? Because I find it kind of fun, honestly, Like I would do like a Bobby Altoff type thing, in bed with Drake or something. I don't know, but like I think that negativity.
It's gonna sound so weird for anybody that hasn't seen it, but yes.
But I do think it's an interesting conversation. If you had more time, I would love to get your guys' takes on that whole thing too, because I think from a brand perspective, it's interesting what she's done. That being said, though, I want to get your take, guys, on how do you make a brand and see success in a world with thousands and thousands and thousands of creators, even talking mobile gaming or Supercell to be more specific. If you're starting out now, how the heck do you create a brand that's not based on a caricature or in your face or shock value or negativity or, you know, that kind of things. How do you do that? Like, how do you stand out when the edits are freaking 10 out of 10? You know, like, what can you bring to the table?
I have a response to that. Go ahead, Shane.
I was just gonna say, I think the first step is to identify the niche that's being untapped in that particular audience. So, like, let's say, like you mentioned, there's all these fancy edits out there. How do you compete with that? Well, not everybody wants to watch those fancy edits. There's lots of Clash Royale channels and viewers that have gravitated towards the more natural, less edited stuff, like, you know, even non-edited, because, you know, it gets overbearing to a point. And so, what it comes down to is that it's finding that untapped audience that can be served with the content that you want to produce. And so, finding that overlap of, like, content that you want to make and having an audience that's, you know, wanting to watch it, and also being, you know, relatively untapped, because if you're trying to do something that someone else is doing, you either need to do it better or you need to do it different.
I love that, and I think one of the things that I would like really hammer home there is not only just niche but value. Think about the value that you are providing to the viewer, right? That's coming to check your channel out and to check your content, right? And there was a question from Xu Ming in the chat, which is basically, do you think it's a good idea to attach your brand to a specific game? And this is, I believe, the cheat code to growing a personal brand, which is leveraging a much bigger brand than you. For example, your thumbnails, like putting your picture in the thumbnail. Well, when you have 0 subscribers or 1,000 subscribers and no one knows who you are, what value does that actually bring versus putting maybe a electro giant or a golem or a witch in the thumbnail, where you're now tapping an audience of Supercell, which has, you know, 100 million players playing the game and tens of millions of followers on social platforms, and, you know, 1 million people looking for content every single day on that particular subject. That's a much more powerful value prop in my eyes. So for me, as a newbie, as somebody starting out, I'm tying myself to the game that I play, and then as I gain a following myself, and as I have, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers, then I'm starting to think about, okay, how can I solidify me as a brand versus, you know, leeching off of the brands that I'm covering. And so that would be kind of my advice, is really lean into the IP of whatever game that you're covering, if it is games, because we as gamers have a unique opportunity to really borrow, legally, obviously they're giving us permission to cover their stuff, but we have a unique opportunity to actually borrow someone else's incredibly popular subject matter and create videos on that. While it doesn't really emphasize the unique nature, because there's a lot of other creators doing the exact same thing, we have to figure out our unique angle to approach that subject matter to the niche that Shane's talking about, where it's like, how can we be a bit different? What angle do we have? Are we incredibly good? Are we entertaining? Do we have unique viewpoints, opinions? Are we covering news? That's what you have to figure out. What is your secret sauce that you can add to the equation? But Alvaro, I'll come to you on the same question.
Yeah, I just want to add that I completely agree to attach your growth to the game you are playing, because it's the game that you are more enthusiastic and motivated to create content on. So that's fine, and that's super good in my opinion. One of the mistakes I've made in the past is just trying to think for myself that, okay, now I'm completely attached to that game, so I have to follow that game no matter the consequences, even if I don't like playing that game anymore. And this is coming from a channel that has switched the main game many times. So I just acknowledge that the best advice is, it's okay to attach to a game if you want to do so, to 2 games, to 3 games, to as many games as you want and you want to create content on. But don't feel that it's a limit to just get stuck in that game, because that's part of your journey and of your brand building in a way. So you will have different stages or different phases in your entire journey as creator. So it's good to have some of them linked to one specific kind of content. But what I want to say is that just don't feel that you are forced to remain with that decision like forever.
Amazing. I would be crazy Absolutely insane. If I did not address a question directly from Supercell, who asked one in the chat a little bit earlier. I know we're up against it, but I want to hit it just really quickly. And the question was, how important is keeping brand consistency across different platforms? I think it's a fantastic question. I think we could be really succinct on this one for time's sake, but I think it's incredibly important. And the reason why is because it serves the awareness component of your brand identity, right? We talked about those purposes that a brand serves at the very beginning: awareness, loyalty, trust building. If people don't recognize you and start to create like that affinity, like when they see you on YouTube over and over and over again, but then they see some posts on Twitter, but it looks entirely different. The image that you put out there isn't the same. The headers on YouTube and Twitter are different. Well, it's difficult to kind of correlate those two things and really have the brand that you've established in content be impacted or built upon on other platforms. So for me, consistency is incredibly important. That's something that I'm always focused on in the projects that I work on, is like, okay, is this the same? Is it consistent? And so for me, I believe it's important. But anyone else have any quick thoughts on that? Or are you all in agreement?
I'm basically in agreement. I would just say that I have run into something similar in my content creation journey, where it's like, you'll have your main channel where it's family friendly, and that's my brand, and I'm okay with that. But maybe every so often I want to start like an off channel where it's just live streaming different games, and maybe I want to have like an after dark stream where it's just like, hey, I'm playing a game. Maybe the game itself is not like family friendly. Maybe it's an adult game. Like I was playing God of War recently, and this graphic and whatnot. But you want to be a bit more like, you want to be able to step out of those bounds certain times, and it can hurt your brand, because now it's like you have people that are like sitting there with their family tuning into your stream because they expect that family friendliness, and now you're playing something different. So I would say, like, if you do that, you have to kind of market it as like, hey, this is different. Like, set those expectations with your audience, like, to know that it's going to be different. So that way you don't kind of like burn bridges, so to speak.
I love that. No, Tim, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what both of you guys said, but I think that also, I think that it's a, you can look at it one of two ways, right? You do want to have that consistency. You don't want to be, I don't know. I mean, it'd be challenging. It depends on who your audience is, right? I know a lot of content creators are covering multiple games on different channels, and I think that even superseding cohesive branding from channel to channel or platform to platform, I think it still comes down to, for me, front and center is knowing who you're talking to. An example is on my Clash channel, my demographics are younger, they're more male, and they're more global. On my other channel, they're older, they're a mix of male and female, and they're more concentrated in the United States. So I might talk about things that I know relate to that age more, stuff like that. I know that's not, you weren't exactly saying that, but I guess in addition, some platforms, especially if you're not present on a platform, let's say you want to, I don't know, stream on Kick or something like that, right? It also gives you a valuable opportunity to maybe shift your dynamic a little bit, You can keep the same branding, et cetera, but it gives you an opportunity to diversify the type of content and the type of, I guess, feel that you want viewers to experience when you're making it on that platform. So I think experimentation is great, and different platforms can give you that opportunity to experiment with different types of content for different audiences and different viewers, and you might want to adjust how you speak and what you say to those people a little bit, But for the most part, yes, I think that, of course, if you want to build a brand around yourself, that consistency is also important.
I love the different insights there, and those caveats, because I agree with all of those as well. And again, we're about at time, guys, actually a couple minutes over. I want to thank the audience for tuning in, and Supercell for having us as always. This has been the Creator Academy. Big thank you to you, Ash, Alvaro, and Shane for joining us here today talking about brand building. If you guys have any questions, feel free obviously to tag us on Twitter or X, whatever it's going to be called. Kind of moving forward, I'm still getting used to that one. But again, big thanks to Supercell for putting this on and committing to helping creators grow. I think it's been tremendously impactful so far. But that's going to do it for us this time here at the Creator Academy Workshop. Take care. We'll see you guys next time.